Welcome everyone, this is Andres Restart, and today is going to be a bit different. If you've been watching my videos lately, I've been touting this idea of having some sort of video every day, and I plan to maintain that. I like that idea. But of course that does come with some challenges. There are some concepts and ideas that I would love to do, but they require more than one day of work. And so, how I sometimes handle things, there will be some videos that will be a bit simpler, that don't require as much work to get done, and so that gives me a bit more time to kind of focus on some of the bigger ideas I have in mind. And so today is one of those simpler videos where I have something really cool that I want to do, but it may take me a bit more time to get done. And I actually had initially planned on talking about the news of the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet epilogue story. They announced it a couple days ago. If you beat all of the DLC, it will be made available to you on January 11th. And so I think that's a pretty cool thing, but not even 24 hours later, that DLC was data mined and leaked out there for those to play beforehand, and people were getting spoiled. Of course, it looks like Nintendo's done a good job of really keeping those leaks locked down, because I haven't seen any of it on my feed. So just so you know, it's out there, you have been warned. And I was going to make a video about this, but as I recorded it and I was about to get into editing it, I realized that I wasn't really that passionate about the subject, and so I just canned the idea. But if you're watching this, you've gotten that little bit of news that it is out there. What I figured I would talk about today is just the state of Nintendo and if we should be concerned about their next generation and the inevitable end of the Switch. Is Nintendo going to maintain the same level of success that they've experienced throughout the Switch era, or are they basically guaranteed to suffer and maybe even experience a potential failure as bad as the Wii U? There are always people that talk about Nintendo doomed, and I don't necessarily agree. I think we are headed in a great direction overall. I don't want to explain why. I'm not at all worried about the state of Nintendo moving forward. So I'm probably going to have just some footage of me dying incessantly in one of the later levels in Pikmin 4. It's a nighttime level, so there's not really spoiling too much there. So sit back, relax. If you do enjoy my content, please subscribe, hit the notification bell. Leaving a like is also super helpful. And yeah, enjoy the ride as we talk about Nintendo every day. So firstly, when talking about the next generation of Nintendo, I do believe Switch 2 is coming out in 2024. I'm not going to argue that in this video. We've had plenty of videos about that already. But one thing that I want to really iterate upon here is that just because Nintendo's next generation console may be coming out next year, that doesn't mean it's the end of Switch. Likely, Nintendo will be supporting both of these platforms for a couple years. As the Switch slowly winds down, the Switch 2, or whatever it actually ends up being called, will wind up. So there will still be games coming out for the Switch throughout most of next year, and I anticipate that there will still be games coming out for the Switch in the year after that. The system will still be supported for years to come, but over time, that lineup, that support will continually thin. And so if you've recently bought a Switch and are concerned about all this talks about a Switch 2, I really wouldn't be. You don't have to move on anytime soon. I still haven't moved on to the PlayStation 5, I have a PS4, and I still enjoy games on that system. Now, do I want a PS5? Yes, but it's been out for a few years already. If you wait this long to get a Switch, I imagine you'll be fine. There will still be some games coming. There's a lot of games already out there. The system will be supported. And this would just be good business by Nintendo. The Switch is still experiencing incredibly strong software sales when you factor in how late into the system's lifecycle it is. Like, they are forecasting 15 million in hardware sales. We are still seeing some of the strongest software sales we've seen in the generation, as we also should, because more people own a Switch now than ever before, so it's more potential buyers of the games they put out. And so this is a moneymaker for Nintendo. This is their primary breadwinner, and they're going to continue to support it. That just makes the most business sense until it's time to move on to the next system. So what they're going to do is that as the system winds down, because inevitably they will reach a saturation point, people will get tired and want the next big best thing. So Nintendo is going to move on with that. But introducing it sooner than later is a good idea, because that first year of Switch 2 there isn't going to be 135 million people that have a Switch 2, so there's not going to be 135 million potential buyers of the games on the system. So initially, for those first couple years, Switch 2 sales aren't going to compare to Switch 1 sales, at least not in terms of overall revenue when it comes to software. So Nintendo needs both. Once the Switch 1 has totally thinned out and people don't care anymore, the Switch 2 will have been out for a couple years and be thriving with a healthy install base with a lot of people buying their games, and things will be fine. That's what I anticipate. But some people are concerned that it may not go that way. They may think that the Switch is a lightning in a bottle scenario, very much how it was for the Wii. But I think this is a very different situation. And something that I've tried to point out multiple times already, that I don't think a lot of people are really factoring here, is that Nintendo is no longer supporting two pillars at a time. In other words, this isn't like when we had the Wii U and the 3DS, or the Wii and the DS, or the GameCube and the Game Boy Advance, or the Nintendo 64 and the Game Boy Color, or the Game Boy and the Super Nintendo. This is just the time of the Switch. There isn't another counterpart. There are different versions of the Switch, but it's all still the same family of systems. So on one hand, this is kind of a situation where Nintendo is putting all their marbles in one basket. This is not like the prior generation where the Wii U failed, so Nintendo was able to focus more on the 3DS and rely on that to carry them until they're ready to move on. If Nintendo's primary system fails, then they're in a lot of trouble. But while that may be the case, the odds of Nintendo failing, because they're focusing on one singular platform now, become almost non-existent. Think about this for a moment. Yes, the Wii U failed, but there were still people playing on 3DS, and the 3DS had a rocky start as well, but it still sold pretty well relative to other systems in the past. The GameCube did not perform really well, but the Game Boy Advance did. The Nintendo 64 did not perform really well, but the Game Boy Color did. And so I think what I just pointed out illustrates two big points here. One, Nintendo handhelds always see success. And the Switch, while it is a hybrid system and it offers that home console experience, is also a handheld. And that's a space that Nintendo has always dominated consistently. There's no reason to think that they will fail in that regard. But also, two, every generation, when you account for the entire slate of hardware that's out there, Nintendo still does perform well. A particular system may suffer a bit, but overall, Nintendo sales are still pretty healthy because there are still Nintendo fans out there that want to play Nintendo games. But now with how Nintendo handles things, because they focus on one pillar, Nintendo fans are all in one place. So when the Switch 2 comes out, even if it ends up not being as amazing as the Switch and as exciting for people, that's gonna be the primary system for years. And so that Nintendo fan base that leads to an overall decent amount of sales across all the pillars Nintendo has had in the past will be there for Switch 2. So, in my eyes, yeah, Switch 2 may not end up being as successful as Switch 1 because it's not as much of a surprise, it's not as revolutionary. These are possibilities. We don't know all the innovations of Switch 2 yet, so that's not a foregone conclusion. But history shows that when Nintendo iterates upon a prior system, when it's kind of following a similar form factor, that second system does tend to perform worse. So from that perspective, yeah, I do kind of think Switch 2 is not going to do as well as Switch 1. But what if they perform about 80% as well, or 75% as well? That's still going to be totally fine. I still think the Switch 2 is probably going to approach about 100 million systems sold once everything is said and done. I hope for more, but I think they'll probably still get close to around that number. Just look at PlayStation. They don't always have more than one pillar, they usually just have the one. And not every generation has been as successful, but once everything is said and done, even their least successful systems still sell pretty good. And so Nintendo's not going anywhere. Even if it's a bad time for them, their overall sales, especially because now they're going to focus on one platform, are still going to be pretty good. And when you account for things like the Nintendo movies, we're hearing about this rumor of this Smash Bros. Pitch in an overall cinematic universe, we have the live-action Zelda, The Mario movie was one of the most successful movies ever made. They're going to continue to branch in that direction, and that's going to become a big source of income for them, and also a big source of popularity that will fuel more fans, more intrigue in the Nintendo systems and games, which will strengthen their chances to sell even more so. And then you also have the Nintendo parks. They are expanding. The Donkey Kong expansion's happening in 2024. And so it's not really a situation where Nintendo just has one thing going on. They have these other things that will help to bolster their primary thing, which will be the Switch 2 once the Switch 1 fully winds down a couple years from now. So this idea of Nintendo failing, highly, highly unlikely. Extremely, extremely unlikely. Like, it's not even really worth worrying about is my main point here. But can the Switch 2 outdo the Switch 1? As I said earlier, I think it's unlikely, but it's not a foregone conclusion either. They may find a way to improve on it. Sony was able to greatly improve on the PS1 with the PS2. Of course, I doubt Nintendo's going to have a DVD-like comparison there. The PS2 is incredible, and one of the reasons why it sold so well is because it was one of the first DVD players out in the market, and also one of the cheaper DVD players out in the market. Oh, and it played games too. So, Sony just had such a huge advantage for that generation, and something like that is unlikely to occur again. But Nintendo, they innovate, they do things. Perhaps their plan is simply to continue to grow their brand, strengthen the appreciation for Nintendo. Throughout the Switch era, I think we've seen a growing appreciation across the masses for Nintendo, because the name of Nintendo has been slung through the mud throughout the last couple decades, this 21st century. Look at the situation with the GameCube, even look at the situation with the Wii. While it was incredibly successful, it wasn't really considered a traditional game system. It was kind of considered a system for babies or grandmas or what have you. But with the Switch, I think most people understand, this is a good system for gamers. It's just not the same kind of experience as you might get on a PlayStation 5 with a 4K television. But with that strength of brand, with that appreciation of their IP, we look at things like these different movies that are on the way, we look at the success of the Mario movie, that alone I think could strengthen Nintendo's chances in having a better generation. Throughout the Switch era, more people were buying Nintendo games than ever before. There's going to be a very strong base there that will have loved those games on Switch, that will want the games on Switch too. So I think it's going to be successful, and depending on how Nintendo handles things, I think they have a chance to rival the success of the Switch 1. But we'll see. Anyways, everyone, those are my thoughts on this matter, but what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This is Andres Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.